Welcome back. It's good to be with everybody on another Tuesday morning. Matt, good to see you.
Good to see you as always.
All right. We left off last week talking about self-awareness when it comes to emotional intelligence, and continuing on with our emotional intelligence theme. Today we're going to talk about self-regulation. This is my lowest score.
Really?
Yeah. This is when I've done my emotional intelligence assessments, self-regulation is my lowest score. Everything else is high, but it's that ability to actually control those disruptive emotions. And when you think about the definition of self-regulation, it is the ability to control or redirect disruptive impulses and moods, and the propensity to suspend judgment and think before acting. Are you still surprised this is my lowest score?
I was not surprised before you read the definition, but absolutely, definitely not now.
No.
And I think when it comes to regulation, and I have a question for you, it's really about controlling and channeling. And I'm going to read just a little excerpt from a book actually later that I think really does a great job of nailing self-regulation. But that self-awareness we talked about, just different ways to try to tap into that, because it's something that's a little bit abstract, at least for me. We talked about either you have it or you don't. You can become more self-aware by having a partner or someone that can give you feedback, someone that you respect. Journaling. I know you do a lot of journaling, of just tapping into and trying to be aware of those emotions, and then also rooting decisions based off of our virtues and taking a look at virtues and who we want to be and who we are and all that. Do you think self-regulation is as abstract, or is this more of a skill you believe that we can learn and hone and get better at?
This is the easiest. This is the one we can have the greatest impact on,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, the self-regulation is the one we can impact the greatest by, once we're aware of what triggers us and what moves us, then we have the ability to actually regulate that. And I would say it's the most controllable and increasable of all these emotional intelligence attributes. It's one of my favorite phrases is, if you don't own it, it owns you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if you don't own your emotions, if you don't own, better stated, I'd say, your reactions to things, then they own you. We just went through this over the weekend with my son. And Dante is a 17-year-old young man who's learning how to become a man, and life's coming at him pretty fast right now. And I had a conversation with him about something on Saturday, and I said, why do you think you responded that way? And he had the classic 17-year-old answer. Lucy's 17 months almost at this point, right? Not even. So you don't.
She said, "I need to control and self-regulate better."
Yeah, right. She's not there yet. But when your kids are teenagers, you're going to get used to this answer, and you say, "Why do you think you did that?" You know what he said?
I don't know.
I was like, okay, well, if you don't own it, it owns you. And it's amazing how much everybody, either out there in LinkedIn land and YouTube land, how much brighter you guys think I am than my own family does. Because I tried telling them, if you don't own it, it owns you. And you need to dig deep and say to yourself, now, why did I respond this way? And say, okay, well, why do I think that's triggering me? Why does that upset me? Why does this happen? And I mentioned that Susie a couple weeks ago, she had me on a little bit of a trigger when she said, she tried stopping me from saying something. By the way, she was trying to stop me from defaming someone else. She was trying to get me to be a better version of myself. Mm-hmm. Everything she did was well-intentioned. It was my negative interpretation of it that sent me sideways. And you think about, as a salesperson, how do we get sideways with our interpretations? Usually invalid interpretations of the way somebody's treating us or the way somebody's sharing information with us. But how do we let that disrupt us? How do we let that get us off track? And I think that happens all the time. But long answer to your question of, this is absolutely the most controllable and fixable.
Well, I think what you're talking about at the end there, one of my favorite topics in sales is don't assume, confirm. We can very easily assume the negative, or assume it's against us, or malicious intent. And why is that? I always talk about that we bring our certain baggage as salespeople. Things have happened to us. We've had our backgrounds and our upbringing and previous experience, and that's all beautiful. That's all good, and we can harness that. But with that baggage, with that background, we need to be able to pause and not view everything necessarily through that lens or through that perception, which oftentimes are assumptions.
Yeah, and the one thing Matt said about malice, one of our isms that we like to banty about around here, is never assign to malice that which could be explained by anything else. So when somebody does something to us, or we perceive somebody doing something to us that is negative, never assign malice to that if it can be explained by ignorance, their own baggage, lack of understanding the situation, their own fear. There's many things that go into people's motivation. Malice isn't always the top one. And yet, what do? For those of us that have maybe a lower EQ than we want, especially those of us that have lower self-regulation than we want, we go into battle mode. I always joke and say when God was creating us and there was all those lines for flight and fight and all those. Well, I skipped the flight line like 3 times through, and I just kept doubling up on the fight. I just kept getting back in that fight line saying, give me more of that. And so for me to run from situations is just, it's not who I am.
Right.
For me to run away from an argument, for me to run away from a debate, for me to run away from a situation, it's not who I am. In my personal life, I can take those on more, and sometimes to my detriment. I've had to learn and condition myself as a sales professional to not always have to be right. I don't have to win an argument. I don't have to win a debate. I just have to live on to fight another day and get another meeting with the person that can sign a contract, right? Because that's ultimately how we're going to help that organization or help that individual the best. Not by showing them who's right or wrong, but by ultimately engaging with them and helping them become better.
Well, just with that last little tidbit, it reminds me of pricing. How many of us as salespeople, if they say, whoa, wow, look at that price, and we immediately instinctually go to, well, it's this and it's that,
right,
and this is what we pay our people, and it has to be this, and this is the value that we're getting, and we just start spitting that out and defending it.
What price would you like it to be? How much of a discount do you need, before they ever ask for it?
But we get defensive.
Yeah.
So it's standing in the way of us saying, okay, more expensive than you thought, as compared to what?
That's right.
And asking those and inviting them to conversation. And to go back a little bit, you were talking about the malicious intent, and there's actually a psychology term for cognitive reframing, and that's the ability to pause, to look at a situation, and to potentially reframe it. So let's use Dante's example, where he might be saying, "Oh, my dad's always on me. He's always, telling me all this stuff and kicking my butt."
Pretty accurate, by the way.
It's life Monday night at the Tallarico household. He could look at that and say, he's really hard on me, and maybe he's not going to do this yet, but at some point he can have, cognitively reframe that and say, well, it's because he really loves me and he wants to prepare me for when he might not be here.
That's right.
So it's loving intent. So maybe a 17-year-old's not going to do that, but just using that example, it's pausing, it's taking a look at it objectively, and maybe there are other motives, and maybe some of the baggage that we do have that's negative isn't necessarily applicable to that certain situation.
That's right. And it's negative because we assign the negative intent.
Yep.
It's negative because we make it negative versus flipping that, like Matt said, and trying to reframe it into what is the positive and what can I take from this? So I think cognitive reframing is a really fancy way of saying shut up. Is that fair? Like just shut up and listen?
Well, in my psychological studies, in my bachelor in psychology, they never talked about that, but go ahead.
Yeah, so it's like shut up and listen. And you don't have to be a victim all the time. And it's not always somebody doing something to you. It's how do we respond to that? And that's where some of the practical things we can do to increase our self-regulation. One would be practicing self-restraint by listening first, pausing and making sure we fully absorb, right? If you're somebody, and you might need those specialty practices, if you're somebody who oftentimes hears somebody say back to you, let me finish, right? What I was going to say, if I completed that thought was, if you hear that a lot, or you sense people are trying to share that with you in a kind way a lot, stop talking, listen more. How do we stop talking? If you're somebody like me that likes to quickly respond and interject, how can you stop talking? Absolute best way to stop talking.
Listen.
How do you listen if it's problematic for you and your mind's going fast and you like to think while you like to speak while you think? Take notes. If you're in a sales meeting and you're somebody that likes to interject and interrupt, take notes. It'll slow you down.
And if you don't mind, I'm going to just read this. I keep looking at this, and I love it because I think it talks about a lot of the elements around this. And so it's giving credit where credit's due. Goldman, Boyatis, and McKee, 2002 book, The New Leaders, Transforming the Art of Leadership. They say this about self-regulation. People who self-regulate see the good in other people and are able to identify opportunities in different situations. They keep lines of communication open, make their motivations and intentions clear, and act in accordance with their values. They also work to the best of their abilities and are able to keep going when times are tough. Wow. I read that and I was like, that's beautiful.
Wish I could be that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? And if you unpack that, it's what you just said. See the good in other people and that there's opportunities. I think part of self-regulation is viewing it from, this is an opportunity. There might be a little conflict here. And we always talk about healthy conflict leads to some of the best relationships that we know of. So it's seeing the good in people, not the malicious intent, calming down that baggage or previous experience that we might have, not assuming, viewing it as an opportunity. We always talk about what? Communication. We're keeping the lines of communication open, but more importantly, our motivation, intentions, and expectations are clear. What does a lack of expectations create?
Frustration.
Yeah.
And over time, frustration becomes resentment.
We talked last week, act in accordance to their values. How often do we sit down and think about our values? And then finally, able to keep going, when times are tough, persistence. It's just, those 3 or 4 points in there, I thought it was action-packed, 2 sentences that did a really good job. I wish I created that. I did not, so I wanted to give them credit. But
next great piece of work that comes out is going to be co-authored by Rogers. But that's great counsel.
Yeah.
It's great counsel and great practical advice on how to increase our self-regulation when it comes to emotional intelligence. We have some other steps, and we'll share those in the comments of this video on LinkedIn for you. Be committed to not interrupting others. Be committed to not assigning malice to what can be explained by anything else. And you'll find yourself having healthier interactions and healthier listening and then healthier relationships. So remember, self-regulation is that one piece of emotional intelligence that we can have the greatest impact on. It's the one piece of emotional intelligence that allows us, or that we can start to focus on and actually grow and improve, and wasn't really assigned to us at birth. And it starts, I think, a lot with self-image, and it starts with self-talk. And the greater our self-talk, the more positive our self-talk, the greater belief we have in that there's going to be something good that comes out of whatever situation it is in which we find ourselves, the greater the impact we can have on that self-regulation. So we're going to continue our series next week on emotional intelligence with a little bit about motivation. We'll work our way into self-aware or social awareness and our social regulation as well. But remember, if you want to have a healthier life, you want to have healthier relationships, the best way to do that is to work on your emotional intelligence. Think about it. That helps us become aware, and then put into practice some of the tips and steps that we've shared with you over the course of this focus time. So again, thank you all. If you have any questions as we head into next week, please feel free to share those with us at evan@tellericogroup.com. That's evan@tellericogroup.com. We'll be sure to address those in upcoming episodes if you share any of those questions with us. And until we see you guys next Tuesday, thank you so much. Go and work on that self-regulation. Take care. God bless.